21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
I wrote this book, and the book is The Value Equation. It's a business guide to wealth creation for entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders. And when it comes to how people get rich, there are certain misconceptions. And one of the misconceptions is that saving money is enough. It's not enough. And your audience is heavily entrepreneurs, meaning they're starting businesses, they're interested in starting a business. That's perfect because 2/3 of millionaires in the United States, and I'm sure elsewhere in the world, this is how they made their money. They made their money owning businesses and oftentimes starting businesses. And the people who start the businesses do the best. But when you're starting a business, the question is, you really want to be able to make a business worth more than it cost to create. That sounds pretty basic, but most of the world's companies aren't that. Most of the world's companies are basically vehicles for people to work for themselves. And that's terrific if people want to work for themselves, be their own boss. But the people who become really rich are those people who have companies worth more than they cost to create. And how you do this is wrapping all the ideas you have and all the great customer deliverables you're going to have into an elegant business model. And so what I did is, in the book, is I take a business model and I devolve it down into 6 basic variables. I mean, you want to dumb it down into as few variables as you can so that people can get a grip on what it is they need to focus on. And in business, when you're trying to think about what is your objective, I mean, your first objective is, I want to make a great product. I want to have a great service. I want to service my customer. And then the second objective behind that is, I want to make some money at this. I want to create a company that's got some wealth, because if I could do that, now I can create wealth for my employees. It's not just about me. It's about all my other stakeholders, my employees, my communities. It's about the ability to grow. If I have a company that can create wealth, I can do all those things. And to get there, you have to have a business model that is going to be harnessing all the financial resources you can muster to be able to make that happen. And what you're trying to do is make returns on equity. So basically shareholder equity. You want to make returns on equity more than what shareholders need. And if you can do that, if you can make it your returns twice what shareholders might otherwise expect, you can double the value of your business. You can make it 4 times, you can make it 4 times the value of your investment. And so what the value equation gets into is how this is done. And it's the first book that I'm aware of that's been written on how businesses create wealth. And why that's important is because that's how the richest people got to be the richest people. I started my career in commercial banking, and I became interested in business models really early on. I was financing lots and lots of companies, and I was really realizing that some companies are just better than other companies. Some businesses are simply just better than other businesses. And around 2000, I started to take some of these ideas and reduce them to a financial model. And that's the value equation. And that's where the book gets centered on. So in a way, the value equation was a book that was north of 20 years in the writing, because I started it then. in the course of doing this, I left banking. I started working in a real estate and finance enterprise in Arizona in the United States, and I was able to take that company public and ultimately make money for our shareholders. We sold it to GE Capital, which General Electric was a big finance company at the time. After I did that, I decided I left GE because I want to be an entrepreneur. I started another company with a gentleman from the first company. So the two of us got together, started another company, grew that company, sold it to a bunch of Australian guys in 2007. And later on, I started, and we took it public, by the way. So that's the second company I took public. And then later on in 2010, did it again. In 2011, raised some money to start a third company, took it public in 2014. Ran it for 10 years, left at the end of 2021. And that's basically when I started writing the book on the value equation. And my goal was to take what I knew from having not only analyzed a bunch of other businesses and reduced the model down to 6 variables, but to have taken those ideas and use it to run my own businesses, my own public companies. And in the last public company, I was able to take these ideas and explain them to Berkshire Hathaway and to Warren Buffett, and to get Berkshire Hathaway to become our largest single shareholder, and sell them 10% of the stock. And so the way you do that is by having them understand clearly what the business model is and why you can repeat it over and over and over again. And so we were able to get that done. And what I'd like to do is just share a lot of these ideas with your listeners, and to have them read the book, learn more about it, and then contact me if they need to, and happy to share more ideas too. The value equation has 6 variables, and I won't spend a lot of time in this format just talking about every one of the variables, but I'll just give you at a high brush what they are. I mean, the number one is sales, and of course, sales is everything. I mean, no company went out of business ever because they had too many sales. The second is operating profit margin, which is basically your cash flow after you pay for after you pay for salaries, after you pay for the cost to run the business. That's your operating profit margin, and it's a cash basis operating profit margin. So it's basically what I try to do is take all the garbage accounting that happens, and we have a lot of garbage accounting. So if you have things like depreciation, or things like um, things like straight line rents, or I can just go on and on and on about accounting and get really wonkish with you. But if you have non-cash accounting numbers, you just back out all the non-cash accounting stuff. So when you're dealing with operating profit margins, just deal with cash operating profit margins. And so that's the second variable. The third variable is, what percentage of the company are you financing with other people's money? And by other people's money, I mean money you borrow from banks. It could be money you lease, where you're leasing your real estate, or you're leasing your equipment. So what kind of proceeds are you getting from other people? And how much of the assets that your company uses are basically gotten from other people, using other people's money. So for example, in the company I ran, the last company I ran, we were basically 40% using other people's money. So we were buying assets for $100. We were using $40 of other people's money, being borrowed money, and that meant we were using $60 for equity. So that's the inverse of other people's money is how much shareholder equity we got. And the next variable is, what does that other people's money cost you? Does it cost you 5% a year, 10% a year? I mean, so that's the next variable. The final variable is maintenance capital expenditures, which is basically how much do you spend in the business every year just on buying stuff that you need to keep the business going. So, I mean, you got to replace equipment that's worn out. buy new computers, remodel. Let's say you're in the hotel business, you may have to remodel every 5 years, whatever. How much money do you spend on that? And those are basically the six variables. So it's sales, uh, investment. I think I might have forgotten investment. Investment is the amount of the whole thing, what it all costs. Operating profit margin, third variable. The percentage you're funding with OPM, cost to OPM, and then the maintenance capex. So six variables. And that's it. And you take those six variables and you can model out any business, anyone, and calculate returns on equity. And then you can start to think about growth. And where I'm heading further with this, which is not in the book, but it's going to be coming out, is basically how do you take those six variables, add a few more in, and make a universal business model. And the fun thing about all these models is that numbers cease to matter. Doesn't matter whether your sales are $1 billion, $1 million, $100,000. It is all about the relationships of these variables to one to the other. And anybody can take any of these relationships and just create their own business model and say, that sounds good to me. And when you're creating a business, this is the kind of stuff you should be doing day one. You shouldn't be thinking about it later. You should start day one. And then if after you've been running a business for 2 or 3 years, you should go back to the drawing board and say, are we running this business the best we can? Do we need to change the business model? Because the business models are everything. This is what is going to power you to a position of greater wealth and power your company to greater success. Entrepreneurs by their nature are optimists. Having started multiple companies, I'm an optimist. um, and but when you're starting a company, you want to take a reasonable risk. I mean, it's a reasonable personal risk, and so you want to know kind of what that risk is. Now, the first part of leap of faith is. Do you have a product that you're devising? It could be a medical product, it could be a entertainment product, it could be a financial product. Do you have a product that you're devising that people will like? And all businesses, by the way, are solving problems for their customers. I mean, and the problems could be as simple as where to have a sandwich for lunch, or as complicated as sending a rocket ship to outer space. But the question is, the leap of faith is, I can create a product that people really want and they need it. And I know they need it, and I know they're willing to pay for it. So I can create this product. And sometimes people run to create the product, not knowing how it's going to be priced, not knowing how much of it they're going to do. The leap of faith comes in the notion that they are just going to fill this demand, and somehow a business model is going to appear. And I would say probably there are times when this has happened. I mean, where people have done this and all of a sudden they start thinking about the business model after the fact. I would advise people to be going in with eyes wide open, and trying to create the business model sooner. And part of why you want to do this is because re-engineering a company, creating something, changing how companies do things is so much harder than if you engineer it right the first time. I mean, if you ever go into a company and you've created a product, you've created a system, and it doesn't really work and it's not very efficient, to terminate employees or to really change radically how things are done to make things work properly is so difficult. It's almost it was just incredibly difficult, and a lot of times companies just don't do it. I've built 3 companies, and my good fortune was that each company was doing this exact same thing. I mean, they did the exact same thing. I did it 3 times, and each time those companies got better and better. So by the time I was doing the 3rd company, we were running 2 or 3 times the assets. The business was 2 or 3 times larger than the first company. with half the people. And we'd figured out how to just do things better and more efficiently. Had I not started three companies, and if I'd done just the first company and grown it, which was definitely an option, at some point I would have had to just re-engineer the entire company, and it would have been extremely difficult. So I'm just saying to people on leap of faith stuff, try to get it right the first time. It's just better, easier. And the fun thing about creating business models is it's creative. I mean, you actually think about how do I would do this, and you don't just copy other people's business models. You can create them from scratch and say, what's the ideal thing? What would work best for me in doing this? And one of the things I've always loved about business is that it's fundamentally a creative exercise. When you're starting a company from scratch and thinking about what employees you want, how you want to buy your product, how you want to service your customer, what do you want to outsource, what do you not want to outsource, what is a core competency? And core competencies are the things that like a company is really, really good at, and what do you want your core competencies to be? Because that's kind of your moat. And my personal view was that you keep all the core competencies and you do them in-house, and you try to outsource pretty much everything else to other people. And so these are all decisions you really have to do, and they're part and parcel of creating an elegant, great business model with the goal of what? Wealth creation, making a company worth more than the cost. Business models don't just happen. I mean, they have to be designed, and the people who design them are people. I mean, and so you're putting together teams of people to make this happen. So I was really fortunate in the companies that I built to have um, a really exceptional team of leaders uh, that I knew and I'd helped assemble, where we could have input from all those leaders to create what would become ultimately the business models and how we ran these companies going forward. So it wasn't all me. I know a lot about business models, but people make this stuff happen. And your best assets, as a guy I worked with for a long time, your best assets were shoes, and you want to keep the shoes happy, and you want to make sure that the people are happy, and of course you're working with your customers. And as a leader and as a person of conviction, I mean, I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have to have conviction in what it is you're doing, and you have to believe in what you're creating. And once you believe in something you're creating, it's hard to stop people from succeeding. And because you become fearless. I mean, the reason Warren Buffett became a 10% shareholder in our company was because I literally cold called him. I sent an email to Berkshire at Berkshire.com, which used to be his basically universal in-mail box, uh, and and he responded to me almost right away. And so whether it was approaching people cold like Mr. Buffett, or whether it was early in my career fighting for legislation from the government and dealing with senators and congressmen and calling them cold as well. I mean, I've been fearless when it comes to trying to promote, and my team has been fearless when it comes to trying to promote the business we have and the ideas that we have. And so when you're talking about the mission and the vision, um, and how important that is, it's very important, and the goal then is to take that vision and mission and wrap it into a business model that really works. And the reason why that's really important is because if you can have a vision and a business model together, and a team, by the way, a team of good people, that's when you can raise a lot of money from all kinds of people to start a business. And in my career, I've raised a lot of money to start businesses from scratch with nothing more than ideas and teams of people. And so I've been able to convince people to give us money, that we deserved to have a chance to start a company. And I've done that by articulating our vision, what the business model is, why investors are going to make some money out of this, why it's going to work. And I find that there's more money out there chasing ideas than there are ideas and management teams. And so if you have a great idea and you've got a great management team, you have something that's really rare, and you can take that and use it to be able to raise money from a wide assortment of companies that exist there to do this. And by the way, early in my career, those kinds of companies didn't exist, but today there are thousands, tens of thousands of private equity firms that exist. And I've used a number of them in starting our companies, and they have helped me create wealth for our leadership team and for all of our other stakeholders. But it all starts with ideas and leadership teams that can convince those people to part with their money and make that happen. And those ideas and those leadership teams are rarer than the money. And so go get it. I'd be delighted, for listeners, if you're interested in all this stuff and want to understand how to make companies worth more than they cost to create and get through the dynamics of this. The book is The Value Equation, and you can find it on Amazon or from any bookstore. Love to have you buy a copy and look at it. Love to have you comment on it. I mean, if you could, comment on the website and talk about your experience with it, that would be terrific. If you want to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. There's a website, www.thevalueequation.com. Eventually, there'll be a website just for me. So it's just going to be christopherhvolk.com. You'll be able to get more material there. If you go to thevalueequation.com, there'll be some free stuff for you too. I mean, so if you wanted to get some posters on how, some diagrams on how wealth gets created, this stuff is free and available to download. There's some financial models out there that are on Excel that are simple to use. The thing I'm working on right now is what I would call a universal business model, and it's taking the value equation, taking those 6 variables, adding a few more, and creating a universal business model. And you'll see more about that later. But again, you can take this, and I'll eventually have the spreadsheet, so it's available to anybody to look at it and run it, make a company that's worth more than the cost to create. See what the components are, and the spreadsheet is dead simple. Formulas sometimes get a little complicated, but they're based on just a very, very few number of variables. It's all about the relationships of these things to one another, and it's not hard to figure out. And all these companies are basically have some common universal characteristics. All businesses have common universal characteristics, and you can take that and put it into something that's pretty simple and hopefully easy to understand, and hopefully help your audience be able to create the businesses and creating actionable ideas and making them into a reality.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.